How do you talk on the radio like a professional? There's 3 main rules. Listen before you transmit, think before you transmit, and keep it short, clear, and concise. If you don't listen before you transmit, here's what can happen.
Missed it. Okay, 3 people talking once, I hear nobody.
If you don't think before you transmit, here's what your readback could sound like.
Taxi via Delta, Charlie, cross runway 13.
AT63 Bravo, crossing 36, taxi via Delta, and Delta 2, AT63 Bravo.
Cessna AT36 Bravo, negative. I'll call your turns.
To put all that together, if you're not listening or thinking before transmitting, or if you're not keeping it short, clear, and concise, all you're really doing is congesting the frequency and making it harder for yourself and the controllers. Here are a few more tips, and then we'll talk about the actual radio call, and I have an example after that. When you talk on the radio, make sure you keep the microphone nice and close to your lips, almost like you're making out with it. When you click the transmit button, give it a split second before you say the first word, because sometimes it doesn't transmit. After you transmit, give ATC some time to respond back to you, especially if you heard some other people on the frequency. ATC might be busy, they might be on the landline with other controllers, and they work multiple frequencies, so just because you can't hear them doesn't mean they're not talking to somebody else. One of the most common things is a wrong frequency. So if you just happen to switch frequencies and you transmit and nobody responds to you, check your frequency, maybe check your volume, make sure that everything is still the way it's supposed to be. If not, go back to the previous people and ask them what the frequency was. To go along with that frequency thing, sometimes you might be outside of the range of the radio transmitter, or maybe you're too low or not within the line of sight. And finally, a few big brain pro tips. Monitor the frequency even when you're not talking or getting instructions, and this helps with situational awareness and knowing what you can expect based on what other people are getting, or like on a CTAF you can see what other traffic is in their area. Also, have expected frequencies written down for ground, tower, departure, etc., and have it pre-tuned in the standby on your radio. That makes it really easy and smooth. So how do you actually make a radio call? Let's talk about the initial call-up, or the very first time you talk to a brand new controller. The format for this is the name of the facility that you're calling, your full call sign, including the letter N, or if you're using your make or model, you don't need the letter N, your position, and your request if it's really short. Now each subsequent time that you call the same controller, you don't have to say Albuquerque departure every time you talk to a departure controller. It's only on the first call. Also, if ATC acknowledges you and then they shorten your call sign, you can also abbreviate it, and it's the last 3 numbers or letters. Here are the types of ATC facilities you might be talking to. Clearance or clearance delivery is at busier airports, and they give IFR routing for airplanes departing. But even when you re-FR, they need to know how to sequence departures, so you call them up and they'll give you a squawk code. Ground control is responsible for aircraft movement on the ground, tower is responsible for landings and takeoffs, and then departure and approach controllers are radar controllers that control traffic into and out of the airport area. And finally, center controllers are responsible for big chunks of airspace, usually that's the en route portion of your flight. So now let's go on to an example. We'll be flying from Portland Airport, PDX, to Tillamook Airport, Tango Mike Kilo, and then to Eugene Airport, that's Echo Uniform Golf. Starting out in Portland, we pre-flight, obviously, and then we get our ATIS.
Portland International Airport AI Fifth Information Lima 23530. Wind 180 at 8. Visibility 10. 4,900 scattered. Temperature 14. Dew point 10. Altimeter 298 feet. ILS. Runway 28 right. Simultaneous. ILS. Runway 28 left approach to use. At live ammunition contact. You have information Lima.
Now that we have our ATIS, we call clearance delivery. Portland clearance Cessna 152 Papa Golf, ATIS Lima, VFR departure, flight following to Tillamook. Cessna 152 Papa Golf, squawk 4516, contact ground for taxi. Cessna 152 Papa Golf, squawking 4516, contact ground. What we just did is let ATC know that we're departing and roughly in which direction, and that we want flight following, and we got a squawk so they can keep track of us on the way out. If you're just departing in a direction and you don't need flight following or anything, you can just say VFR departure to the north, for example, And same thing, they'll give you a squawk code to keep track of you until you reach the end of their airspace, and then off you go on your own. So now that we have our clearance, we can call ground. Just so you know, ground operations is the most difficult part of the flight. So it's a really good idea to know the airport layout and where you expect to go before you actually get there. You want to make sure that you don't cross any runways unless you explicitly get told to. And if you're not sure, definitely stop and ask. You can ask for progressive taxi, and that's a turn-by-turn direction from ATC. We'll go ahead and give ground a call, and I'm going to throw in some examples from actual transmissions, just so it's not me talking, you getting sick and tired of my voice.
Ground Skyway 3556 is ready to taxi. 3556 and runway 2 right, taxi via Kilo Victor Alpha. Kilo Victor Alpha to runway 28 right, SkyWest 3556.
As you're making your way to the runway, it's a good idea to let ground know that you will need a run-up if you need one. Now once you're done with your run-up and with your checklist, switch over to Tower and be ready to go. Portland Tower, Cessna 152 Papa Golf, holding short, runway 28 right, ready for departure.
Southwest 3341, Portland Tower, runway 28 right, line up and wait.
Left and wait, 28 right.
You just heard line up and wait. What that means is you get on the runway, you line up for takeoff, and you stop, and you wait for ATC to give you further instructions.
Southwest 3341, wind 110 at 3, runway 28 right, clear for takeoff.
Clear for takeoff, 28 right.
Cessna 152 Papa Golf. So now you go ahead and take off and follow ATC instructions. You might be turning in a different direction than you initially thought for traffic. And when you're instructed, contact departure.
Southwest 3341, contact departure, so long.
Departure 3341, good day.
When you check in with departure, you want to say your call sign, your altitude that you are currently at, and this helps them cross-check with their radar and the transponder return. And then if you'd like, you can give them your final altitude that you're climbing to.
Departure citation 942 Juliet Sierra 2500, climbing at 6, runway heading.
Station 942 Juliet Sierra, full departure, radar contact, climb the same 6,000.
6000, Juliet Sierra.
As you're talking to departure control, eventually you'll get to the edge of their airspace, and if you wanted flight following, they'll switch you over to the next controller.
942 Juliet Sierra, contact Seattle Center 128.3.
128.3, Juliet Sierra.
I'm not sure if you caught that, but they switched over to Seattle Center, so now they're talking to an en route controller. And as you fly on your route, you'll switch from one center controller to another one as you pass over different radio transmitters. If there's any traffic in your area, you'll get a traffic advisory.
Tower 9 Echo Tango, traffic 6 o'clock and about 2 miles eastbound altitude, gauge 5,300, unverified.
And once you get close enough to your destination, usually ATC will ask you if you have the weather for the airport. If not, they can get it for you. They'll also let you know if there's any traffic in the area. And if not, they'll go ahead and switch you over to advisory frequencies.
Radar services terminated, squawk 1200, change to advisory frequency approved, good day.
So what this means now is that they're not monitoring you on radar anymore. You can squawk VFR, which is the transponder code of 1200, and you can switch over to advisory or the CTAF frequency for your destination airport, which is Tillamook in this example. Now, being a good pilot, as you are en route, you're getting the destination weather when you're in range, and based on that information, you know what runway is being used, and you also know the pattern altitude because you looked it up beforehand, right? As you can see, based on the wind there, it's favoring runway 31, and we know that runway 31 is a left traffic pattern. We also know that the best way to enter the traffic pattern is on a 45 degree to the downwind, and then you do downwind base and final. Now in our case, the downwind leg is on the opposite side of where we're coming in from. One way you can do that is overfly the airport at 500 feet above traffic pattern, and then do a 360 and enter the traffic pattern. So that's exactly what we're going to do. Without a control tower, you self-announce and self-separate from other traffic. And keep in mind that many airports use the same frequency, so you need to say the airport name at the beginning and at the end of the transmission. As you get close, you start reporting about 10 miles out. And please, for the love of everything that's good, don't say traffic in the area, please advise. Now, having said that, what you do say is Tillamook traffic, then your position relative to the airport, and how you plan on entering the pattern. And then as you get close, you make more position reports, and then you want to make position reports on downwind based final, and then when you're clear of the runway. One final note is that just because you don't hear anybody on the radio doesn't mean there's nobody there. Remember, you don't need a radio to operate in non-towered airports. So we're about 10 miles out. Here's your first call. Tillamook traffic, Cessna 152 Papa Golf, 10 miles to the northeast. We'll be overflying the airport at 1500 feet for a left downwind entry, runway 31, Tillamook. As you get closer, Tillamook traffic, Cessna 2 Papa Golf, 5 miles to the northeast, overflying the airport at 1500 feet for a left downwind, runway 31, Tillamook. Now let's say you hear somebody else. Tillamook traffic, November 12345, will be making a straight in runway 31, 5 miles out. So now you have to make sure you self-separate, and you might want to make a couple extra position calls and whether or not you see the other traffic. So now you say, Tillamook traffic, Cessna 2 Papa Golf, over the airport, 1500 feet, will be making a right turn to join downwind for runway 31, Tillamook. Now you make your nice 360-degree turn and you say, Tillamook traffic, Cessna 2 Papa Golf, joining downwind, runway 31, Tillamook. Now let's say the other person reports a 1 mile final for runway 31 and you see them, you could say, Tillamook traffic, Cessna 2 Papa Golf, beam the numbers, traffic on final in sight, will be following to runway 31, Tillamook. So now the other person lands and you're turning base, so you say Tillamook traffic, Cessna 2 Papa Golf, turning base, runway 31, Tillamook. And then you turn final and you say Tillamook traffic, Cessna 2 Papa Golf, turning final, runway 31, Tillamook. And then you land and you breathe a sigh of relief because that was a rough approach. And you get off the runway and you say Tillamook traffic, Cessna 2 Papa Golf, clear of the runway, Tillamook. And what do you know? You made it to an uncontrolled airport. As a side note, if you can't get the weather for some reason, you can overfly the traffic pattern 500 feet above traffic pattern and look for a windsock and look for a traffic pattern direction indicator as well to know which way to enter the traffic pattern. Okay, so now you've stopped over, you had your lunch, you did whatever you were doing in Tillamook, and now we're continuing on to Eugene, Oregon. And so what we do is we pre-flight, obviously. We get our weather, and they're still departing runway 31. So we go ahead and get in the airplane, start it up, and we're starting to taxi out. And so what we say is, Tillamook traffic, Cessna 152 Papa Golf, taxiing for takeoff, runway 31, Tillamook. You taxi up, you do your run up, and now you say, Tillamook traffic, Cessna 152 Papa Golf, taking runway 31 for a southeast departure, Tillamook. And as you're climbing out, you're going to be departing the pattern, so you say Tillamook traffic, Cessna 2 Papa Golf, departing the pattern to the southeast, Tillamook. And then off you go on your way. While you're en route, you can monitor frequencies along your route of flight if you're flying next to any airports. And you can also get flight following if you'd like. You contact the Seattle Center in this case, and you tell them where you are and what you want. Now for our example, what we want to do is we want to get weather and route. Let's say you had your lunch and you didn't check your weather because you forgot. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to call a flight service station frequency on the way and see if we can get our weather. As you can see on this chart, there's a couple frequencies that we can try to talk to a flight service station. If you remember from a previous video, the frequency is up on top, and on the bottom it's the name of the station. So you tune in either 122.5 or 122.6 and you'd say McMinnville Radio, Cessna 152 Papa Golf on 122.5. And that helps them narrow down what frequency you're on so they can talk to you. And when they come back to you, you can say, hey, this is 152 Papa Golf at this altitude, this position, going to Eugene, Oregon, and we'd like to get the latest weather and a forecast. Or whatever it is you wanted. If you needed PIREPs, and they would just give you that information. You can give them a PIREP if you'd like. And then you say thank you, goodbye, and that's it. So now we're getting closer to our Class Delta airport, and as you know, to get into Class Delta, you need to establish two-way radio communications. So way before you get to that point, let's try to get the ATIS.
Eugene, Malin Sweet Field. Automated weather observation.
So now as we get closer, we'll give Eugene Tower a call. We'll say Eugene Tower, Cessna 152 Papa Golf, 10 miles to the northwest, inbound for landing with Charlie. Cessna 2 Papa Golf, Eugene Tower, enter straight in, runway 16 right, report 3 mile final. Enter straight in, report 3 miles out, Cessna 2 Papa Golf. Now when you get to a 3 mile final, you say Cessna 2 Papa Golf, 3 mile final. Cessna 2 Papa Golf, runway 16 right, clear to land. Clear to land, runway 16 right, 2 Papa Golf. Couple notes here. Tower will tell you how to enter the traffic pattern, or approach if you're talking to an approach controller. A couple common clearances you can expect are touch and go. If you decide to do touch and goes and stay in the traffic pattern, you can be cleared for the option which is anything. You can do a full stop, you can do a touch and go, you can do a stop and go. You can get a full stop, which means you stop, get off the runway, or you can do a low approach, and that's usually for instrument approaches. After landing, you contact ground what tower tells you, and then follow ground's instructions. Cessna 2 Papa Golf, turn left, Alpha 4, contact ground 121.7. Left Alpha 4, contact ground 2 Papa Golf. Ground Cessna 152 Papa Golf, Alpha 4, parking signature. Cessna 2 Papa Golf, right on Alpha, left on Delta to the ramp. Right Alpha, left on Delta to the ramp. Cessna 2 Papa Golf, good day. And so now you taxi in and you park. And once again, like I said, it's good to know where you're going. Signature happens to be Signature Flight Support, which is an FBO name. And so there you go. That's how you do a flight. This particular airport is a small enough airport where it's a part-time ATC controlled. If you see, there's a star both on the taxi diagram and on the sectional chart, and that means that the tower is part-time, which means when it's not in operation, you operate like you do at an uncontrolled airport, where you use the CTAF frequency.
Union Tower and Cascade Bridge Control hours of operation are 0600 local time until 2330 local time. The common traffic advisory frequency is 118.9er. Pilot operated airfield lighting is available on 118.9er. For weather and flight plan information, contact McMinnville Radio on 122.3.
Finally, some closing thoughts, or human factors, or whatever you want to call it. I know talking on the radio is scary, and it's confusing, and sometimes it's nerve-wracking. Just keep in mind that we're all humans. ATC is not Zeus up there waiting to strike you with a lightning bolt when you say something wrong. Quite a few of air traffic controllers are actually pilots, so they know exactly what you're going through, especially if you're a student pilot, they remember what that was like. One of the big things is don't be afraid to admit that you're not sure what something means. You can literally say, "I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you mean." And then they'll go ahead and try to explain it to you. If you're at an unfamiliar airport and you're not sure how to get to where you're going, you can ask for a progressive taxi. And if you're a student pilot, let ATC know that you're a student pilot on your initial call. As I mentioned before, make sure you're listening even when you're not transmitting or receiving instruction. That way you know what's going on around you and you get good situational awareness. You want to make sure you're using standard phraseology, and that's in the pilot controller glossary. And then just remember that practice makes permanent. Definitely doesn't make perfect, because I still make mistakes and I've done this for a while. One final note, if you have a chance, visit a tower. Talk to the people working there, talk to the ground controller, the tower controller, the approach controller. Look and see how things operate so you can see things from a different perspective. As I always say, have fun, fly safe, and always keep learning. See you next time.